Welcome to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast on Tobacco Road Sports Radio and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com as part of your Wrestling Wednesday card. I'm your host, Michael Davis. Last week, we had our first ever interview on the show with referee Youngblood. If you missed that episode, you'll want to go back and watch, but you'll want to watch after this episode because today we cover everything that's happened this past week in wrestling. Do we know Sting's final opponent at AEW Revolution this year? And was this the right call? The Wanted Man, formerly known as Dolph Ziggler, has shown up not one, but two places. And there's going to be another surprise or two for New Japan and TNA big events this past weekend we'll cover. But we're on the road to WrestleMania. We're 10-ish days away from the Royal Rumble, and we need to know how to get there. So without further ado, we got two guests in right now. One of them is my co-host for the Cat Cave that also drops on Wednesday afternoons on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel. We got my guy, Bully Ryan Frick. Ryan, how are you doing?
Doing good, man. Ready to talk some wrestling here as we are on the road to WrestleMania. So I'm excited. I'm ready to get to it.
I wish you were wearing a wrestling shirt. I understand your Lions advanced this past weekend. My Cowboys did not. That is why I am wearing a wrestling shirt supporting some indie tag teams. John Schuyler, Zuka King, and JAC. But we also
Zuka King. Let's go. Yeah.
Okay, somebody else knows who Zuka King is. That's awesome. But we have a first-time guest on the show. And if you recognize him from other YouTube channels, he is the founder of Everything College Basketball. He puts out really great stuff. Trevor Everett, who's been on the Out of Pocket show with me, was able to connect him with me. I'm super excited to know that Josh is a wrestling fan. Josh, what does it feel to be on your first Drop the Mic?
Well, I appreciate the fact that I get to do a little change of pace. I spend so much time talking college basketball that my wrestling side, which has been there since birth, I was born in 1989. I remember my first shows around 91. So basically when I was 2, watching Hogan and Warrior and Mr. Perfect. It is fun. I'm excited to be on. I appreciate the invite. And I can't wait to talk. And by the way, you're talking wrestling shirts. You should have said something. I would have grabbed my LA Knight shirt. Yeah.
He's not the first person to imitate LA Knight on the show. It's funny you mentioned being a fan since you were basically 2 years old at your first wrestling show. Like, I was born and my dad was watching Saturday Night Wrestling on that little TV monitor in the hospital. So I don't know if he was more excited about me coming into the world or whatever was happening in the world of wrestling.
It depends on whether it was Shotgun Saturday Night or WCW Saturday Night.
My dad
Saturday Night.
My dad passed it because he was a wrestling fan and from the 70s and 80s. He kind of fell off a little bit in the 80s, but primarily watched NWA more than he did WWF. And local India, like we're from Indiana, so he would go see like WWA wrestling out of Indianapolis. And so, he passed that love down to me, man. So I've been blessed. I love it, bro.
Hey, it's something you can bond over with your family, your dad, your friends, your guests on your podcast. And what better way to do it as the road to WrestleMania begins with talking about a very controversial subject. Now, we have a allotted time for this segment. We'll have Zach Colburn and Nate Warden back in on Drop the Mic next to talk about Sting and his AEW run, potentially who his opponents will be at Revolution in the Greensboro Coliseum. But the entire wrestling world is just fighting over who should wrestle Roman, what should they do with Cody, does he finish his story at WrestleMania, where's CM Punk and Seth Rollins get involved with all this. And I wanted to invite Josh on the show because A, he doesn't get to talk a lot of wrestling when he's talking college basketball. It's a change of pace for him. But B, I heard he has a very, what I believe to be a controversial take on Cody Rhodes getting to WrestleMania. What is your path for the American Nightmare going into Lincoln Financial Stadium?
So I've put some thought into this because I do think, there's been the controversy with The Rock coming back and dropping the head of the table kind of teaser line. I'm still a believer in Cody, Roman. We got to run it back. They've worked too hard. It's a new regime. If this was with Vince, it probably would have been switched 100% to The Rock. But if you've seen him a couple weeks ago in the ring for that little 30-second segment he did with Jinder, the dude was blown sky high. So it reinforced my idea that we've got to get the Cody and Roman at Mania. I've thought about this. It'll take a little playing around with, but when I think about storylines, a lot of people just shout, I want Cody to win at Mania over Roman, or I want this person, but never have a backstory to come out of it where opponents and feuds are set up. So I think I've got that here if you want to get into it.
All right, let's see what you got.
So we start at the Rumble. I've got Punk winning the Rumble, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. I've got Punk winning the Rumble because he's going to pair off with Rollins. It makes too much sense. It's going to make a huge amount of money. It can main event night one of WrestleMania. That's got to be that story on Raw. The final four of the Rumble, I would have Punk, Cody, Drew, and Orton. And here's where you kind of play with it a little bit. I know Orton's in the Fatal 4-Way. But we've seen it before in old Royal Rumbles where a guy would have a match and then come back. However you want to do that to get him back into the Rumble. Those would be my final four. Cody eliminates Orton. Orton's going to play a big factor in this kind of story. Just stick with me here. Cody eliminates Orton, which kind of has Orton like, all right, you got me, but kind of upset about it too. Then Drew would take Cody out. However he does it, dirty, whatever, because you don't want Cody and Punk being the last two, I don't think, and splitting the crowd. You want the crowd behind one of them at least. That leaves Drew and Punk. Punk eliminates Drew. Punk wins the Rumble. Now, how do we get Cody into Mania now? So you go to Elimination Chamber. This is where I would pull the trigger on Rock Roman. They're going to Australia. They're doing this massive event. And this is where I say you're going to have to play with me a little bit here. But Rock Roman at Elimination Chamber. Cody wins the Elimination Chamber for a world title shot. Since we've already got Raw, by that point, Punk says, I'm going after Rollins. Then, all right, well, now who's Roman going against, or potentially Rock, because they'll have to keep it up in the air. Who's going for the Universal Heavyweight title? Cody wins the Elimination Chamber, and because it is, we'll be going after Roman's belt. It'll be a couple like Raw superstars mixed with a couple SmackDown, kind of a cross opportunity. Cody pins Orton. Again, Orton plays a role in this. Just keep that in mind. So Cody gets his title opportunity for the winner of later that night between Roman, Rock, in the main event. You get to that main event Elimination Chamber, the Rock, Roman, big match, all that fun stuff. I know we've done it before, but again, it plays into this whole story. You do the whole screw job finish because you don't beat the Rock clean just yet in this situation. Solo is the one that cost the Rock. He has Roman down, whatever you want to do it, a schmaz. Solo has to be the one that cost the Rock. Again, it'll play a factor in here in just a minute. Then we go on to the road to WrestleMania. Our main event matches are set up. You've got Punk, Rollins. You've got Cody going after Roman. Takes us to on the way to WrestleMania. At some point, a couple weeks before, he's starting to get build up, right? He's already beat John Cena up last year. At some point, The Rock calls out Solo. And again, this is where you have to play with me a little bit, but I think it makes a lot of sense. Which leads to a Solo Rock match at WrestleMania. Why? Well, because you've got to build stars. And I think Triple H and the new regime's trying to do that. Solo is being built anyways as kind of a monster future heel. They've already talked about it with Roman as he could be the new head of the table, the new tribal chief, all that fun stuff. It keeps The Rock out of Cody's way to go for Roman and still gives him a match I think he would be happy to do, helping his family member in a match where Solo and The Rock are at WrestleMania. I would have Solo beat The Rock. Now, I know people, that's where, again, you're like, they wouldn't have The Rock lose twice and all that. However you want to do it. It can't be clean because I know The Rock's not going to take the clean win again. Solo's got to beat him because, again, we're elevating stars here. We're pushing new people, elevating stars. But it plays into the end of the night as well because Cody beats Roman. You can do the whole bloodline interference again where it looks like, it's going to be the same as last year and the same as always. But this is where you can have Orton and The Rock and Jey Uso come out, or either all three, two of the three, whatever, to help be in Cody's corner, run the bloodline off, and then you get down to the final couple minutes of that match between Roman and Cody. Roman hits him with the spear. Cody's got to kick out at 2.999999 just to keep the fans on edge. I think it'd be a huge pop when he kicks out. Roman's upset. He goes for the Superman punch. Cody catches him. Crossroads. He'll probably do it to 3 times if we're being honest, because big matches, he loves to do that. Cody takes down Roman, gives him his first loss in 3-some years, ends the streak, takes the belt. He's crowned. This is where The Rock can also anoint him, because he does get his heat back by coming out and helping him, chasing Solo off from earlier night. So Rock can still kind of look good at the end of the night. We've built Solo. The Rock, quote unquote, anoints him. And if Orton's out there as well, it builds that tension to where the next night on Raw, Orton can come out during Cody's kind of celebration deal. Hey, I'm happy for you, But keep in mind the months earlier where he eliminates him from the Rumble. He pins him to keep him from getting a world title match. And then that's where Orton turns RKO. You have Cody's first major feud as world champion that's going to be red hot because there's a story there. You can run that for 5-6 months throughout the summer. And then the Solo deal, if you think about it, he's already taken down Cena. He's beaten The Rock. So we're building him as a top-level heel. That can be Cody's next feud. You've built basically a whole year worth of storyline for Cody that is money-making feud and built new stars in the process.
Mike, it's your show,
Josh.
so I'm gonna let you respond to this.
I want Bully Rai to just.
Do you want me to take this?
I want Bully Rai versus heel Josh Burton right now.
Okay, all right.
if I got to step in afterwards,
there are so many holes in your story. You might as well call the story itself a cheesehead. I admire your optimism as a Packers fan, and as absolutely invested into your program here going to WrestleMania. Problem number one is that Roman Reigns will not be champion going into Elimination Chamber. I also believe that The Rock, as they've already announced, The Rock will not be in Australia for the Elimination Chamber. So that's not going to happen. They're not going to let Rock come back to main event pay-per-view overseas to then sort of undercard WrestleMania with Solo Sikoa. It's not going to happen. My thought process is that Roman is in a fatal 4-way at the Royal Rumble. The Rock will have something to do with this match. And we've had this teasing of Damian Priest cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase on Raw to take the title off of Seth Rollins. I think this is where you finally see the trigger pulled. He interjects himself in this match, and Damian Priest is the person to take the title off of Roman. Now, Roman doesn't eat a pin, but Roman will not be the champion going into WrestleMania because you don't need The Rock versus Roman Reigns for the WWE title. Now, having said that, the only reason that I think they take the title off of Roman is because they anticipate him losing the title by WrestleMania anyway. Now, if all rumors, innuendo is to be true, then Roman is going to hold this title for much longer past WrestleMania, which means that whether or not Cody Rhodes gets the title off of him at WrestleMania, he's not going to finish his story as long as Roman Reigns is champion beyond WrestleMania, which they're thinking. So my thought process is that the Fatal 4-Way sees Roman Reigns lose the championship without being pinned, thanks to some interference by The Rock and by a cash in from Damian Priest. And you're going to get, I'm with you, Josh. I think CM Punk is the odds-on favorite to win the Royal Rumble because you're going to have him up against Seth. I think that's a no-brainer. I don't think CM Punk comes back without the opportunity to win the Royal Rumble, which is something I believe he's never done in his career. Yeah, and more than likely, he headlines WrestleMania for the first time against Seth Rollins. I still think I'm with you. I think Cody Rhodes goes on to win the Elimination Chamber to get a shot at the WWE Championship or the Universal Championship, whatever they're calling it now, at WrestleMania. But whether it's Damian Priest or whether it's LA Knight, whatever the case is, I think that Cody is not the one to take the title off of Roman Reigns. And this is from somebody who's been saying for 2 years that it's always been Cody to be the one to take it off of Roman Reigns. But if they're not going to take the title off of Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble, they're not going to do it at WrestleMania, whether it's Cody Rhodes, whether it's The Rock, because I think that if you take the title off of Roman at the Royal Rumble, you're going to get Rock versus Roman at WrestleMania. They've put the foundation has been set long ago. And I think Rock finally has the time to do it. And I don't necessarily think you need the title to be on the line for Roman to go over The Rock here, because I don't think The Rock is coming back to beat Roman Reigns. But again, if Roman holds the title after Royal Rumble, I would imagine The Rock may come in and win the Royal Rumble or find his way into that match with Roman Reigns one way or the other. But it's going to be Rock and Roman at WrestleMania. It is going to be CM Punk, CM Punk, Seth Rollins at WrestleMania, and or Cody Rhodes will be finishing some story. I don't know what they're going to plan on Cody to do. Like this makes Cody Rhodes the odd man out.
So I've actually written down just a theoretical WrestleMania card that I do think is. Let me say too on that pitch. I mean, I read the rumors. I follow Fightful. I get their updates and all that stuff, right? So I do understand. This was just me in my mind if I was pitching it as well. It's not necessarily exactly. That's why I said you got to play along with me on some of this of what I would do. Mania, here's some of the matches I do think will happen that make sense. I've already said Cody, Roman, Punk, Rollins. I think Intercontinental title where we're headed is Gunther, Brock. I think Rhea, Becky has kind of already been planted. Io, Bailey. I would not be surprised Logan Paul, LA Knight for the U.S. title. And then I would still do the Jimmy J. I just don't know what to do with Drew. You talked about Priest. I mean,
cut out there.
Drew, they keep teasing this whole thing of Drew calling him an idiot and everything. I think Drew has to factor into that somehow. Whether he cost him fully the cash in, I think Drew has to factor into somehow because they wouldn't keep teasing it if not.
I mean, listen, you are going to see Jimmy J open up night one of WrestleMania or whatever night that Roman wrestles The Rock. You're going to have Jimmy J open the show. But I mean, a lot of the rest of your card makes sense. The Rhea, Becky. I think that you're more than likely. I don't think you're going to get Io Bailey. I think you're going to get a 4 or an 8 woman tag match. Well, at least before Charlotte got hurt, that's what I expected to happen. But I don't know. You feel like it would point in the direction where Bailey would take on Io, but it might be Damage Control versus Bailey and Shotzi,
Trinity,
and Trinity coming back alongside Bianca Belair. That could very well be the direction they're headed to as well.
And there's a lot to decipher over these next couple months. We're going to have a huge special next week on Drop the Mic since it's just a few days before the Rumble. But before I get y'all out of here, I got to debunk both of you guys because I did put an article out in Sports Carolina Monthly saying that Solo Sikoa is the one to dethrone Roman. They mentioned it in a promo last month on SmackDown that Solo's the next tribal heir. The Rock isn't coming back to the Elimination Chamber. If you watch the Young Rock, The Rock said that a match that big versus Roman Reigns can only happen at WrestleMania.
Yep.
But if Roman loses the title before then, that kind of lowers his credibility, whether it's in Fatal 4-Way or not. The allure is with him with the gold championship belt. And there's only one final boss that he is yet to defeat for the tribal chief, for the head of the table. There's only one guy who can elevate Roman's legacy, and that's The Rock, which means Cody Rhodes is not going to be finishing his story. Now, what I do see happening is Cody entering a feud with maybe Drew McIntyre to get him to WrestleMania, maybe Solo Sikoa since Solo cost him last year. But with the World Heavyweight title, it would be so hypocritical. And we got to get out of here because we got Zach and Nate. It would be so hypocritical for CM Punk 10 years ago to complain about Batista, part-timer, coming back and win the Royal Rumble match to main event WrestleMania, putting other guys, full-timers, on the back burner, just for CM Punk to do the exact same thing 10 years later for this match against Seth Rollins. That's where I don't think the title is needed. I think the title is needed for Rock Roman to keep Roman at that number one pedestal. But if Punk can cost Rollins the title, or if Priest cashes in, that gets Punk versus Rollins at Mania without the title. And maybe Finn Balor versus World Heavyweight Champion Damian Priest at WrestleMania for the World Heavyweight title, and maybe Lear the Judgment Day. But we can talk about this all next week. We got to get out of here. We got to get Zach and Nate. They're waiting backstage. Again, we're going to do a huge preview next week. Be sure to listen to Ryan and PJ on Tapouts and Touchdowns. We'll get PJ in here a little later on the show. You want to stay tuned for that. And you want to follow Josh Burton, everything college basketball, Twitter, Facebook. There's a group, YouTube channel. He does really great content. Super excited to see him do his stuff. Hopefully Duke has a better year, but we got to get you guys out here. Next, do we talk about Sting and his final match at AEW Revolution? Welcome back to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast on Tobacco Road Sports Radio and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com as part of the Wrestling Wednesday card. Thank you so much for Ryan from Tapouts and Touchdowns, and then Josh Burton from Everything College Basketball. Josh doesn't get to talk wrestling a lot, so I'm super excited that he got to hop on. Had some questionable stuff, but don't worry, guys. We will have a huge Royal Rumble show in store for you next week. And then a little later on in today's episode, we'll have PJ Steven, also from Tapouts and Touchdowns and the Wrestling Movement on Facebook. He'll come in, talk about what happened at TNA this past weekend, what happened at New Japan this past weekend. But I also wanted to get some other admins from the Wrestling Movement team up. You can go follow us on Facebook, and let's introduce them. One of them was currently claiming to be the Intercontinental Champion and was on the season 3 premiere a couple weeks ago. We got Nate back in. Nate, how are you doing?
Doing good. Happy to be here.
I'm glad you're back. And then we got somebody who you might have seen on Out of Pocket with Michael Davis back last year when we were running on Friday afternoons talking NFL, NBA. Don't worry, is all I'm going to say there. But we got another guy claiming to be an Intercontinental Champion. It looks like he's taking over the Monday Night War and the Drop the Mic Wrestling podcast. We got Zach Colburn. Zach, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Michael. Hope you are.
I'm doing pretty good. Anytime I get to talk to you guys, it's always a pleasure. We got a Facebook group going. And by the way, this is my official plea to one Josh McKinney. You better be at Revolution. Just FYI. Because at AEW Revolution, we're about 6 weeks away. Sting will have his final match inside the ring. Never say never, but I mean, I would assume Sting keeps his word. It's going to be at the Greensboro Coliseum, and they haven't officially announced who he was wrestling, but it became pretty apparent last week on Dynamite. We'll probably find out more tonight when Dynamite airs at 8 o'clock on TBS. But the Young Bucks appeared after Sting and Darby's, honestly, like hardcore, brutal win last week against Hobbs and Takeshita. I have thoughts about that just in itself. But the Young Bucks came out and they stared down Sting and Darby Allin. So it looks like the Young Bucks are Sting's final opponent. I want to get y'all's thoughts on this. Nate, do you think this was the best route to go for Sting's final opponents? You only got one chance at this.
It's hard. It's hard to find, the exact right opponent for your final match. I mean, they could have went a number of ways with this. I understand why they went with a tag match. There's all kinds of, routes they could have went. I wouldn't have minded seeing him face off with Malachi Black. I feel like they have something there. Both of them kind of got that spooky vibe to them. I would have liked to seen that. I could have think of some other tag teams they could have put him with, but I think the Bucks will, deliver, in that spot. And I think they're a very hateable team, which would, create a good environment to cheer for Sting and Darby. So I'm okay with it.
Nate's okay with it. Zach, do you share the same sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, it's like he said, it's tough to decide who to face for your last match. I mean, I know what they're trying to do with Sting, trying to protect them. Honestly, I thought they'd go the route of a singles match between him and Darby Allin. I mean, kind of a passing the torch. But I mean, I guess it went that way. But who knows what'll happen? With it, we still got a month and a half.
We still got a month and a half to see, what all builds up to this. And I did want to note, like, the Young Bucks, I mean, it is their company. Like, it almost feels like they kind of like, hey, we'll do the job for Sting in his final match or whatever. But I think protecting him in a tag team environment I think Zach said off the show that Sting's never been in a one-on-one match, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And if from last week's match, if Sting and Darby keep doing those spots in the ring or outside the ring like they're doing, they might be limping into the Greensboro Coliseum, which wouldn't be good for anybody. Nate, I know you watched that match from last week. Are you okay with Sting taking these nasty bumps heading into Revolution?
I mean, he knows his limits. He's done it for a long time. You know, I got to feel like they're trying to do it in a safe way. And I mean, he's kind of going out on his terms, you know, and so I'm okay with it. I feel like we also need to give him a little bit of credit. You know, I feel like he knows what's fun and he knows what's going to be the most enjoyable, like last match for him. And if that's a tag match, if that's against the Bucks, I think I read that they had a match, like maybe a 6-man match with him a year or two ago, and he really enjoyed it. And so that's why he had a say in them being in that final match. So, you know, I think he knows his limits. You know, I mean, he's been doing this for 35 years. So I guess it's 35. I don't know. I haven't done the math. But, you know, I'd like to see him make it to Revolution since we're going, you know, and we got good tickets and we, you know, went through a little bit of heartache to get those. But, you know, I mean, he knows his limits. So hopefully he takes care of himself and we see him at Revolution in March.
It's going to be a historic night. You have to be there for sure if you are anywhere near the Greensboro Coliseum in March. Zach, are you flinching or like trying to hard not to look when Sting's taking these bumps? Because again, like if he gets seriously hurt, we either have a repeat of Ric Flair's last match in Nashville, Tennessee, which I was there for, or we might not even have a match at all, depending on how bad it is. I'm just really worried.
Yeah, I can understand, you know, with his age. I mean, I think back to one of his last matches in WWE. I mean, some of the bumps he took against, you know, Seth Rollins then were nasty. And you look at some, and last Wednesday was a perfect example. You know, some of those bumps. I mean, and he's in there with a guy like Darby Allin, who his mentality is he likes to go all out, and sometimes, you know, that brings itself to be, you know, somewhat dangerous.
Yeah, and Darby, I think, is going to turn out to be like Jeff Hardy in a way. I hope it doesn't happen, but the things that guy puts his body through, if he doesn't slow down, I'm really, really concerned about Darby Allin. But that's his character. That's his gimmick. He's going to keep doing it, and he's not going to listen to Michael Davis, even though he probably does listen and drop the mic. Let's be honest. Who doesn't? But it does look like Young Bucks as Sting's final opponent in the Greensboro Coliseum. And I had an idea. I want to run it by you guys. Like, I'm okay with the Young Bucks because even if Sting and Darby do limp into Revolution, Young Bucks could have a 5-star match with a broom. Whether that's by my eyes or Dave Meltzer's eyes, they could do it.
They may have.
I remember,
we don't know, but it's possible.
Possibly.
They have. Go ahead, Zach.
Well, and you look at, you know, if you're looking at, you know, tag teams in AEW's roster, who has, you know, the most experience outside of like an FTR? I mean, who, you know, who's done the rings, who knows how to carry a match to a degree.
Yep. It's a very good point.
And I'm glad you brought up FTR because I think if there was any other tag team you wanted to have, if you're protecting Sting in a tag team match and you're not having him wrestle one-on-one, FTR versus Sting and Darby Allin in the Greensboro Coliseum is great. My only like hesitation would be like, who would you cheer for? Nate, would you have rather had FTR since they are North Carolina boys?
That's tough. I think you could win either way. I mean, certainly you'd have a great match with them, you know. So you couldn't go wrong with FTR. I mean, you can put them in the ring with anybody. They're going to look great. They're going to deliver. You know, so yeah. I mean, it could have been them. It could have been the Bucks. You know, I mean, honestly, it could have been, you know, a couple other teams, and they would, you know, I feel like they would really do it right. So yeah, I could see FTR being in that spot. But to your point, you know, do you want to split the crowd? You know, it's kind of like we saw, you know, a good example, and I don't want to take up too much time, but a good example, you know, we saw on, I guess it was SmackDown a few weeks ago, they're advertising, a champion returning, and everybody's like, who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? And they bring out Jinder. And then it was like, oh my gosh. And the crowd goes mild. And he gives a 5-minute promo, and everybody's just like, oh. And then the Rock's music hits, and the place goes crazy. And so I think it's like, it's hard to have a really good babyface without a heel. And granted, at this point, Sting, people are going to cheer for him if he's going against another babyface. But, I still think there's like that psychology there that you want to have somebody to cheer against and you want to have somebody to cheer for. And it makes for a better match when you have that.
Oh, absolutely, Nate. I mean, when you think, face versus heel, I mean, example of, we had face versus face when one of the quote unquote Ric Flair's last WWE match, him and Shawn Michaels. I mean, that was split. But I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with you. Face versus heel makes it makes it more intriguing, and it makes it honestly more fun.
It could make it for a very fun atmosphere in the Greensboro Coliseum. And we still got a few weeks to ponder this. We're getting in the WrestleMania season, a lot of wrestling going on. PJ will be here in a couple minutes, also from the wrestling movement. And if you're noticing those Intercontinental titles on the shoulders of Nate and Zach, they're going to hang it up 20 feet above the ring and have a ladder match to determine the undisputed Intercontinental champion, much like Razor Ramon and the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels did. But they are admins on the wrestling movement. If you're enjoying them on the show, if you're enjoying Ryan and PJ, Desmond Johnson, the Tobacco Road producer, was on the show a couple weeks ago. If you're enjoying them, go follow us on the wrestling movement. It's super excited, but we're talking about Sting's final match, and we have a few weeks to think on this one. But I want to get your initial thoughts, knowing that it could be Sting and Darby versus the Young Bucks. Nate, do you think Sting loses his final match? He hasn't lost a match. No way.
No way. No chance. Nobody wins if he does that. Like, people want to go home happy. Send them home happy. I mean, there's no way. There's no way he's losing. Darby's going to jump off the ceiling if he has to make sure that Sting wins his final match. And he's already proven he's going to put himself through it. He'll jump off anything. He'll put his body at peril. No way he goes out on his back.
Yeah, I agree with Nate there. I mean, no way do I see that happening. Because if it does, imagine it being like some of those old WCW matches where they were just throwing stuff in the ring. It could be something similar to that.
Oh, they're getting my drink. If he takes the pin, that I'm hitting somebody with my drink.
I may have to throw the popcorn at him as well.
Well, I mean, there's always the sentiment like you go out on your back and you put somebody over. But do the Young Bucks really need the win?
No. I think it gives them go away heat if you do that. People are going to be like, give them, like X-Pac. They're going to be like, just go away, there's already a lot of people who didn't want him in this spot. I mean, we're okay with it, but I mean, you don't gain anything from it if they win. I mean, everybody knows who they are, what they can do, the matches that they've had. Everybody's there to see Sting. If the place sold out to see Sting, there's no benefit to having him lose. I mean, at this point, at his age, I think everybody's aware that, like, he's older, he's a little bit limited, and taking nothing away from him, but there's no way he goes out on his back.
No, and I think so. The only thing that I think could possibly happen that gives any kind of heat, if there's any go away heat, it'd be on Darby Allin if something were to happen there.
Oh my.
Like Darby turning on Sting?
You never know. I mean, you think about it, Dominic and his father. I mean, how much heat did that put on Dominic, and how much did that put him over? Oh my
gosh. What a take. Holy cow.
Whoa. Could you imagine Darby? Darby's been like the babyface pillar. Darby is the only pillar between MJF, Sammy, or Jungle Boy Jack Perry, who we'll talk here in the next segment with PJ, who hasn't turned heel. And for Darby to turn heel against, yikes, that's like a Hogan turning heel moment, and there would be trash in that ring.
Man, what an angle.
I know, right? I mean, you never think, Darby, he could pull it off, being that brooding heel. I mean, you think about Darby and Sting, both have that brooding mentality in them, have that face pain. I mean,
or you think about Raven back in WCW, he could kind of pull that off,
Exactly.
Yeah, that melancholy kind of character. You're right.
Oh. Well, Zach, you mentioned Dom turning on Ray. If that happens and you just called Darby turning on Sting, you're going to have to wear a Rey Mysterio mask anywhere you go to conceal your identity so no Sting fan jumps you. But guys, thanks for hopping on, talking about Sting. We'll talk about this more in the coming weeks. We'll probably dedicate an entire segment to Sting leading into Revolution. But we got to get into our last break. When we come back, we're going to welcome in another Wrestling Movement Facebook admin, PJ Steven. He's also on Tapouts and Touchdowns. We'll talk about one of the pillars who showed up and ripped up his AEW contract in the middle of a New Japan ring next on the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. Welcome back to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast on Tobacco Road Sports Radio and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com as part of your Wrestling Wednesday card. It's been a packed show so far. We've had Josh in his first appearance from Everything College Basketball. We've had Nate and Zach on the last segment talking about Sting. And we also had a friend of the show, Ryan Frick from Tapouts and Touchdowns. And so we had to get the other co-host of Tapouts and Touchdowns, their weekly wrestling show. You may also recognize him from the Wrestling Movement's Facebook page. Me and him, Ryan, and a few others are admins on there, Nate and Zach as well. But PJ, it is about time we got you in for your Drop the Mic debut. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, man. I'm sorry that I couldn't make it last week. I was very sick. I'm still got a little cough going on. But the podcast I just recorded with Frick, I'd have to mute just a little bit so I could get a cough or two out. But I'm very, very excited to be here amongst everybody else here. Super stoked. So thank you for having me, man. Thanks a lot.
Of course. Now, I was very apprehensive about bringing you on, honestly, because I'm supposed to be the guy with the best hair on the show. But, dude, how long is yours now?
Mine goes all the way to like the start of my butt crack.
Dude, I'm about halfway down my back right now.
Yeah.
So
I haven't cut my hair since maybe 2014. I cut my hair. I trimmed it when I got married because I just wanted to get the dead ends gone. But that's the only cutting I've done since. Yeah, it had to have been like 2014, maybe 15. But yeah, it's been a long time.
Dang, that's awesome. Hopefully I get to your length. Nobody's going to make me cut mine. But the cool thing that PJ brings to the show that a lot of people love WWE, rightfully so. It's a good time. A lot of people love AEW, rightfully so. It's a great alternate on Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays. We just talked about Sting's final match coming up here in a couple months, but there's still more wrestling. You could watch wrestling every day of the week, and there'd always be something new on to catch your eyes. And so a lot of people may not know about TNA. Yes, it's still around, and they actually just rebranded back to TNA this past weekend. And then you have New Japan. Both of them had really strong weekends. Actually, both a really strong start to 2024 if you include Wrestle Kingdom. So we'll talk about Japan here in a few minutes, but TNA did rebrand. It was Impact Wrestling, and then Scott D'Amore is taking the brand to new heights. And they had their first pay-per-view back under the TNA banner called Hard to Kill. There's a lot of thoughts I have on this. A few bullet points we'll touch on in the segment, but PJ, watching TNA is Hard to Kill. What was your overall thoughts leaving it? Were you like, okay, I'm invested now, or was it like they left something on the table and didn't deliver?
Oh, I was invested right when I heard that they were going back to TNA. I remember watching TNA in between 2004 and 2007 when the X Division was large. When you mentioned Sting comes back to feud with Jeff Jarrett, the King of the Mountain. Christian comes and is on TNA. You have Sanjay Dutt taking on AJ Styles and Samoa Joe, and the Fallen Angel Christopher Daniels for the X Division title. TNA was when you talk about the alternative to WWE. That was TNA back in the day. It lost track a little bit. Big thanks to Dixie Carter and that crowd. You also had Jeff Jarrett kind of booking for himself for a while, which is very familiar. But as soon as I saw that TNA was going back to TNA, I already bought Hard to Kill. They sold me in. As far as what I thought of the event, every single second, every single match, I was like, God, this is a rebirth. This really is what I feel. From Jordan Grace taking on Trinity to the main event to Chris Sabin becoming your X Division champion. I mean, spoiler alert, but the whole event was tremendous, and it really felt like it was a rebirth for TNA, and I can't wait to see where it takes us.
And it's interesting you mentioned the X Division being such a catalyst for TNA in the early years. AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, like the list goes on and on. Chris Sabin, who's now a 10-time X Division champion, he had a great match with El Hijo del Fantasma, with Kushida. Like that was a great match. But I think when you said like start to finish, if they had to have their identity in the X Division, their very first match with the Knockouts Ultimate X showed you that they're going to put an emphasis on what the old TNA fans loved with the Ultimate X match. And then they have a star-studded Knockouts division that they're going to put work in. And that started with the Ultimate X match, and then it ultimately culminated with Jordan Grace beating Trinity for the Knockouts title.
Absolutely. Women's wrestling is so amazing nowadays, whether you're looking at WWE or AEW or Stardom in New Japan or Stardom in Japan, even All Japan, and now you're looking at TNA like we're talking about. Women's wrestling is taking the world by storm. It's no longer this is the women's match, I'm going to go use the bathroom. Then you're going to miss terrific pro wrestling, no matter what promotion you're looking at, because there's such a great emphasis on how great women's wrestling is nowadays that you don't want to miss it. And I think that some of the opinions of some fans who are still in that mindset of, well, this is just a Divas match, I think really takes away from the fact that women's wrestling is sometimes, if not a lot of times, more entertaining than some of the other matches on the card. I mean, shoot, you had WrestleMania 35 with the very first time
Becky
women
and
main
Charlotte and
evented.
Ronda.
We're not going to talk about how Ronda messed up that the finish, but I'm just kidding. I'm just saying that because we were there and it was clear that something went wrong, and I'm going to blame Ronda because I don't give about her reputation. But no, I mean, look at that. How great that was, that triple threat match, and just how fantastic women's wrestling is. When you mentioned the knockouts, you're absolutely right. TNA is putting emphasis on the knockout division, and I think that's going to be a feather in their cap, much like it is with AEW right now, and how it's been for a long time with WWE.
And with the knockouts and the X Division being focal points on this show to show fans what they're going to be about moving forward in 2024 and in this new rebirth as TNA, you have to have a champion. You have to have the world champion, and they decide to put their stock in Moose as he beat Alex Shelley in the main event. Do you think that was the right decision to put the title on Moose heading into this new era?
I do. I think Moose is the guy to carry the division, or to carry the company rather in this new era. I really, really do. A lot of people are saying it should have been. I mean, but here's my thing: who else in the company right now? I mean, when I think of Impact, and now I'm thinking of TNA, but when I think of Impact in the last few years, I think of Moose.
So I do think Moose was the right decision to go over Alex Shelley. To me, I love Alex Shelley. I love the Mercy Machine Guns, but Alex Shelley wasn't believable to me as a world champion. And Moose was by far my pick to win it. I picked it last week when B from Talking Suplexes was on the show as we previewed the pay-per-view. But you could have also put it on Mr. Josh Alexander, who had an incredible match with Hammerstone. Like if it wasn't going to be Josh Alexander, I'm okay with it being Moose.
Josh Alexander's a great pick as well. I most definitely agree with that. He's worked a few New Japan matches as well, and he's a fantastic athlete. He's a freak, I tell you. But yeah, that is someone else you could have put that on. You're right.
But one of the big things you can't do in the pay-per-view realm is can't have a pay-per-view with all this hype without somebody debuting or returning or this big moment that you get watching as a fan. And that happened when formerly known as Dolph Ziggler, if you're seeing scrolling on the video feed on Tobacco Road Sports Radio right now, subscribe, catch all our episodes. You had formerly known as Dolph Ziggler, Nick Nemeth, join TNA, rip off the Motley Crue shirt. Shout out to Brad Attitude because he needs a new legs t-shirt. But Nick Nemeth, Dolph Ziggler, whatever you want to call him, is in TNA. He also showed up at New Japan's Wrestle Kingdom a couple weeks ago. So, PJ, I don't know what to expect from, we'll call him Dolph, like moving forward. Is he full-fledged in TNA, making Japan appearances? Is he just all over the world? What is he doing?
So you touched on it right there. Not only was he at Wrestle Kingdom, he now has a match against David Finlay at the New Beginning in January. He's obviously going to be in TNA, hopefully feuding with Moose. And now it's just announced that he will be participating in GCW's new event where he will take on Matt Cardona. So what the point is, Nick Nemeth now has a chance to indeed, he's going to show the world. Whereas now, back in the day in WWE, he was showing a little bit of the world. Now we can show every division, every promotion, exactly what he can do because he's a hell of a worker and he's a great wrestler. And he can talk on the mic. He's got it all. And former World Heavyweight Champion, former NXT Champion. I think Nick Nemeth does have the resume to go wherever he wants. But he's going to go to the place where he can wrestle, and that's New Japan Pro Wrestling, at least for the time being, when he's taking on David Finlay. And I can't wait to see it. I really can't wait to see it. That he's right now doing exactly what Cody was doing. If you remember when Cody left WWE, he went to PWG, he went to Ring of Honor. We soon saw him have a fantastic reign as Intercontinental Champion in New Japan Pro Wrestling, taking on Juice Robinson, then taking on Ibushi. And then, of course, we saw him later on, help start AEW. Now he's back in the E because they wanted him back in the E. They paid that money to have Cody have his original theme, to have finally his name, Cody Rhodes, and put him back in the division. I think, or put him back in the company. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Dolph Ziggler back in WWE years down the road after he's established himself, just like Cody did in the indie scene in New Japan and TNA.
That's a good point, PJ, because if you think about it, Cody did it. I think Matt Cardona has built himself up over the last few years. Like, he's doing it, and now there's buzz about when does he come back to WWE? Does he come back to WWE? He's making more money on the indie scene right now than he ever did in WWE, which for somebody like Matt Cardona, like, that's really hard to give up unless you're going to go for some like $1 million deal. And Nick Nemeth is going by the most wanted man. That's his moniker right now. And it feels like every promotion wants him. There's a indie North Carolina promotion, AML Wrestling, that's already confirmed that he'll be at least one show this year. Wouldn't be surprised if he's at AML. Wouldn't be surprised if he's at WrestleCade later in November on Thanksgiving weekend. But
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is AML the one that Kevin Kelly started? Is that the one?
AML's the one that Tracy Myers and Brian Hawks
from WrestleCade. Okay, got it. Got it. Maybe they run. Was promoting it or something because I saw him post something about it a few times. AML, but I didn't know that Tracy Myers actually started the promotion. That's really cool. Tracy Myers is a good guy. I've been to WrestleCade a few times and got to meet him and talk to him for a long time. He's a solid dude.
Yeah, Tracy's incredible. They do incredible work with WrestleCade. I've had a lot of great moments and a lot of great memories there with my brother, with my dad. I go every year. It's one of the best weekends you can do if you're a wrestling fan and you want to go to a fan convention where you can actually feel like you get your money's worth. or feel like you have like really good personal interactions with the wrestlers you see on TV, the ones coming up, the ones you grew up watching, that is a must. It's also a must to check out New Japan. We talked a little bit about TNA. We talked about Dolph Ziggler being in both promotions, but somebody who went on to New Japan this past weekend and stood in the middle of the ring and ripped up an AEW contract was formerly known as Jungle Boy, Jack Perry. Jack Perry ripped up his AEW contract in the middle of the ring. There's a partnership going on with AEW in Japan, so I don't know if it's a hoax or not, or if it's a story. What do you make of Jack Perry first being in Japan, and if he has left AEW, is that a good thing that one of the pillars is gone?
I think that that's cool what you mentioned about him, one of the pillars being gone. I think that's interesting because right now you've got two of your pillars gone with MJF, taking a break after the latest pay-per-view with him losing his title to Samoa Joe. Now you got Jack Perry in New Japan. Sammy Guevara just coming back from injury, and rumor is that Darby Allin is, I don't think he's injured, but he's got to take some time off after a botched bump. But seeing Jack Perry in Japan, I think works. And I think Jack Perry got a lot of heat. And it started with Forbidden Door 2 when they had him take on Sonata for the IWGP Heavyweight Champion. There were so many fans that said, why is Jack Perry getting this shot? Why is this? Why is it? Jack Perry is a phenomenal athlete. And he doesn't quite have the charisma. I won't say charisma. He doesn't quite have the gift of gab like he's not an MJF on the mic. But I think maybe turning him heel will help fix that. And so far in New Japan, he's looking like he's a heel. He comes out, rips his contract. To answer your question, if it was a work or not, this is pro wrestling. To me, most things are a work. But what I will say is, supposedly, rumor and innuendo, take it with a grain of salt, that Tony Khan did not know that was happening. Now, I think it's a work. Again, you talk about the working relationship between New Japan and AEW. I think it's a work. I think we're going to see Jack Perry heavy in New Japan, and I think it'd be fantastic. We're about to see Mustafa Ali take on Hiromu Takahashi in New Japan at the Windy City pay-per-view in Chicago. I think, and you know me, I love New Japan. I think that's where the greatest pro wrestling is on the planet. Some of these folks are gravitating towards New Japan Pro Wrestling because they know that they're going to be able to be pro wrestlers and they're going to be able to get a little bit more teaching and training in the New Japan dojo, or just working around these people and these wonderful wrestlers to gravitate towards other places. I'm not saying that New Japan's the be-all, end-all, but it is if you want to learn to be a wrestler.
And that could be a perfect place for Jack Perry to, learn some traits inside and outside of the ring in Japan. Wouldn't put it past him to show up at Forbidden Door and have Jungle Boy versus maybe Will Ospreay. The two guys switch promotions and now are representing another one. We're a couple minutes left in the show, but Ospreay wrestled Okada this past weekend. Shockingly to me, lost to Okada. Did the favor for Okada. But this means that Ospreay's upcoming departure. I think Hiroshi Tanahashi's getting older. He's moving into a newer role. Okada's getting up there in age. Has kind of flirted with doing some stuff stateside as well. For those not familiar with New Japan, who could they be looking at in terms of the next man up in New Japan in the main event scene?
Well, it's funny. I'll try to keep this short because I know we're up against it. What I'll say is Wrestle Kingdom 18 was a new generation Wrestle Kingdom. You had Yuya Uemura taking on Yota Tsuji in a Wrestle Kingdom show. You had David Finlay defeating two Wrestle Kingdom veterans with Jon Moxley and Ospreay. You had ELP and Hikuleo defeating Bishiman, who was Yoshihashi and Hiroki Goto, 3-time World Tag League winners in a row and multiple-time IWGP World Heavyweight Tag Team Champions. So you have these new generation of wrestlers. New Japan is trying to usher in this new generation of wrestlers. You had Rin Narita. Yeah, it was a tag match. Rin Narita and Evil taking on Shota Umino and Kaito Kayumayu from Pro Wrestling Noah. It's a new generation. And so when you talk about who to watch in New Japan, keep your eyes on Okada, keep your eyes on Tetsuya Naito, all these guys, obviously, the big ones you see. Tanahashi, go back and watch Okada and Kenny Omega. But if you're watching it from right now to where you want to keep going, keep your eyes on guys like Sanada, Shingo Takagi, Rid Narita, Yota Tsuji. Most definitely, he was my pick for Rookie of the Year. He fantastic worker. Keep your eyes on ELP, El Fantasmo, and Hikuleo, Gorillas of Destiny. Keep your eyes on Tama Tonga, who just won the Never Openweight Champion, is taking on Evil January 20th at New Beginning. This new generation of New Japan Pro Wrestling, I think, will be the catalyst that's going to usher in a brand new era for New Japan, and I think it's going to work out to their favor. You're going to see, Okada losing a little bit more, I think, and putting over some guys. But, to keep it short, I love all pro wrestling. It's either I like it or I don't like it. It has nothing to do. I don't look at ratings. I don't look at, if they filled the arena. I don't care about any of that. I care about what I'm watching on my screen or what I'm watching in the ring when I'm live. If I'm enjoying the pro wrestling, I'm going to enjoy it. WWE has great moments. AEW has fantastic moments. TNA is going to have some amazing moments, but New Japan Pro Wrestling to me has perfect moments, and that is pro wrestling. And I love it very, very much.
Hey, and another name I want to keep an eye on is Shota Umino. He's doing more work in Japan, but dude, we're up against it. PJ, thank you so much for hopping on Drop the Mic today. Thank you for a great cast of all the guests we had. Go follow Tapouts and Touchdowns. You can listen to PJ and Ryan, the co-host of the Cat Cave, every week talking about wrestling. If you don't want to miss another episode, subscribe to Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, our new TikTok. But most of all, thank you guys for spending your Wednesday with us on Drop the Mic. We have to get out of here, but whatever you do, don't drop the mic. We'll see you all next week with a special Royal Rumble preview. Everyone, have the best week.